friends ever since.
You might have seen my recent video where I was talking about the MPC 2500 and specifically how mine appeared to be broken. I documented the process of me troubleshooting and hopefully repairing the thing, only to discover that there was a big crack in the PCB, which probably meant that it was dead until I was able to get a replacement. Now, I uploaded this video, and despite one of the rather helpful commenters on there telling me that nobody was interested in my failures, other people were much more helpful and encouraged me to open it back up, try some different things, and I managed to get it working by repairing the traces. So thanks to everybody out there who's positive, and a big fuck you to everybody else. Anyway, I decided to celebrate this jubilant occasion by purchasing JJOS-XL as a treat to myself. If you're not familiar with JJOS-XL or JJOS in general, there's this kind of weird story about how there was a developer of the original software for the MPC 2500 and 1000s that worked at Akai. They left the company, but somehow they managed to take the source code or their experience there and continued to build this shady aftermarket OS which built upon and improved a lot of the features within the MPC, and there's all sorts of mythos around this. No one really knows who they are, but you do have to pay money in order to get access to it, and it's not especially cheap considering it's this kind of off-market thing. Anyway, I finally caved and I got my JJOS-XL license, and I decided that I should probably learn how to use it because it's quite different to the original Akai OS. So I decided to make some music with it, experiment with some of the newer features, and I'm doing a video to share what I've done so that, well, because I have an endless need and desire to be validated by strangers online, apparently. I'm just joking, I don't really care. This is just a nice excuse to make things. One of the things that I really wanted to do was learn how to chop samples that I'd found elsewhere and record them in the MPC and sequence them, because this isn't something that I usually do. In the past, I've used the MPC largely as a one-shot machine or to record samples directly in, which were specific to the composition. So I went hunting on YouTube, found some hopefully copyright expired samples of old jazz records and things like that, and I recorded them directly from my laptop onto my SP202. Now, the reason that I recorded them onto the SP202 first is for a couple of reasons. First of all, the SP202 is well known for having this kind of lo-fi crunchy sound that I wanted to get for the kind of thing that I was going to write, or, you know, just to experiment with. Secondly, the SP202 has this really nice pitch function, which means you can slow things down and it just sounds fantastic. So decided to go in there first as a kind of, you know, initial staging. From there, I recorded the samples from the SP202 into my MPC 2500 wholesale. I didn't chop them or anything on the SP202. And from there, I used JJOS-XL's chopping functionality to get them into, you know, individual bits and pieces. Now, I have to say that I spent far more time on this portion of the process than I would care to admit, for a couple of reasons. First of all, JJOS-XL, even though it's, or perhaps because it's so fully featured compared to the original Akai OS, is actually quite different to use, and it took me a bit of time to figure out how everything worked and what the shortcuts were and everything, and to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure on what's going on. However, this is, you know, all part of the purpose and the reason for going through this. The second thing is that I am not very good at chopping things. It's not something that I do very often, as I mentioned, and originally I was trying to figure out ways to get each individual phrase to play and work perfectly with every other phrase, if that makes sense. So I was trying to make it so that I could hit pad 1, hit pad 6, hit pad 4, and whatever pads I hit, they would all work one after the other, and that, on reflection, doesn't really make much sense at all. And then what I did was just kind of accept the limitations of the chops that I had made, and I took one of them, I tapped out the tempo relative to that, and then I loaded up a 606 drum program in there, and I played along a basic beat, and that gave me the kind of foundation of where I was going to go from there. I should probably mention, actually, when I loaded the samples into the MPC, or rather sampled them into the MPC, I did further pull the pitch down by about 3 steps or 3 semitones or whatever, to give it a wee bit more of a, you know, a slower feel, because even with the pitch shift on the SP202, it didn't feel quite slow enough. So Anyway, from those humble beginnings, things began to take shape in the sense that I could then develop the drums, I could then play along the pads with different melodies and then add things in. And before I knew it, I had quite a lot of sequences that I thought sounded pretty interesting. To add some more flavour to the melody sequences that I had in there and kind of glue things together, I recorded in some bits from my Yamaha Reface CP, playing along whilst the other sequences were playing so that everything was in time, which is something that I really love about using the MPC. Now at this stage I was ready almost to record it into my DAW and then start to arrange things. However, I realised that it probably needed something else, and so I rooted through my sample library and found these kind of obscure vocal phrases, which I then chopped up in the MPC so that they were kind of more spread out among the pads, and it meant that I could play along with the drums and the melody and kind of glitch them up and make them sound cool. However, I didn't want to just record these vocal chops onto a loop because that would get really repetitive really quickly. So I decided that I would just put all of the drums and all of the melody into Logic first, and then I would worry about the vocals. To do this, I assigned different individual instruments or portions of the instruments to different outputs on the MPC 2500, and the fact that this has got 8 individual assignable outputs and a separate stereo output is one of the reasons that I got this over any other MPC, because it gives me so many options in terms of processing and multi-track recording things. So for example, kick was an output 1, snare was an output 2, hi-hats were an output 3, cymbals an output 4, toms an output 5. I had my main kind of chops on the stereo output, the vocals were an output 7, output 8 was something else. With everything recorded into Logic and all of the sections kind of chopped up and colour coded so that I could move them about and, you know, arrange my track or whatever, it was all coming together, but I realised that I needed something else, and so I decided to cave to my internal pressure and pick up a Yamaha Reface YC, which conveniently arrived just in time for me to complete my second night of working on this track. Now the YC is one of the more unusual from Yamaha's Reface line in that it emulates or replicates a whole bunch of organ sounds, and after getting the CP and really enjoying it, I thought that this would be a really interesting thing to try out, because you don't really hear organ sounds like that too often in modern obscure electronic music anymore. If you go back and listen to reggae or some of the trance hits from the 90s, it's a bit more common. You might not realise it, but it's definitely in there, and so I wanted to experiment with that for myself, and so I recorded a bunch of the YC into my track and kind of padded out the sound a bit, which I think sounds pretty spectacular, particularly in the low end where it's got that kind of Leslie speaker emulation. It just sounds brilliant. To top things off, I went back to the MPC 2500, I played the track through in Logic, and I just tapped out different vocal chops on the pads to give it, you know, a wee bit more of an edge than just an instrumental. And that's it. It's not the greatest musical accomplishment in the world, but I think it's a decent shot for a first kind of experimentation with techniques and also an OS that I've never used before. I'm going to leave you now with the track and see what you think of it. If you happen to have an MPC 2500 with JJOS-XL and you've got any tips for me, or if you've got a Yamaha Reface YC and you want to share any of your thoughts on that, then please do, because this is all very new to me and I'm really keen to understand it a bit better, and obviously random people on YouTube are the best way to do that. For now, that's it.